Great. So Chairman Wheeler, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I know you've had a busy schedule with some travel. I think we caught you just between a trip between Cabo and Europe. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, it's a tough life, but somebody's got to do it, Paris, you know.
Absolutely. Well, some of the things we were thinking about was, as we continue to run these events, we'd love to find a way to entice you out to the Bay Area. Is there anything we can do to get you live next time in person?
Well, you know, I mean, I think I need to get real personal with you here for a second, Paris, because one of the things I know about you guys is there's an In-N-Out burger right across the street. And you want to talk to me about a double and animal fries? I mean, I might be able to just figure out a way to get out there.
Oh, that's great. You know what? I think that's something we can take care of. It's part of the identity suite, isn't it?
Absolutely.
But that's almost heresy for an East Coast guy, particularly a Washington guy like me, because as you know, Five Guys started right here in the Washington area.
Well, we'll make sure to swing.
If I throw over Five Guys for In-Out, I mean, that's a big deal.
Absolutely. And I think there's a taste test, I think, in the future somewhere here.
Good. I'm up for it.
That's great. Well, Tom, I'd love for you to start us off. I think we have a great summit group here. A lot of people are very excited to hear from you, and I'll let you take us off.
Great. Well, thanks, Paris. I mean, I do wish that I could be with you all today, but as Paris indicated, I'm going to be in Europe when you all are actually meeting. I mean, the fact of the matter that you're bringing together carriers, those who rely on the ability to use the phone to reach out to consumers, legal experts at Danal is a very important activity, and it's a key part of solving the scourge of robocalls. So I want to say thank you to Danal for pulling this all together, and do a tip of the hat to my friend Jim Greenwell for all the leadership that he's had in bringing everything along. I remember when this was just an idea in Jim's head. But as you know, the robocall issue is the #1 source of consumer complaints at the FCC. And I don't mean close #1. I mean by a huge margin. And consumers want answers. The Congress wants answers. They were all over us saying, what are you doing about this? And I got to say to you, just yesterday, as you can see, I'm working out of my home office here. And just yesterday, I got a call from with a Microsoft scam. And despite the fact that I'm on a do not call list. And I mean, that just kind of indicates how real this is and how we've got to get a hold of it. And getting a hold of it requires a full toolbox, if you will, of activities. I think it is really terrific how the 4 main carriers have come together to share their subscriber information to allow for real-time validation. The work that Danal is doing on that is really important. It is also important, and I know the representatives of CTIA sitting there in the audience, it's also important that all the other carriers participate as well, because you've got to have this kind of a broad reach so you can check out everybody, do a total verification. So the work that you're doing is very, very important. I might also add that, Congress has an important role in this as well. And one of the difficulties that we faced when I was at the commission was that the TCPA is 25 years old, 26 years old. And the kinds of definitions, the way things are worded, they were written in a 25-year-old environment when an awful lot of the things that we take for granted today weren't even imagined then. So it's about time for Congress to step up and update the expectations of the TCPA. And then, of course, the FCC has an important role in all of this. probably in three main areas. I mean, enforcement. During my time as chairman, we had two of the largest fines, approaching $3 million each for some rather flagrant abuses. We had rulemakings and declaratory actions that defined some of the issues in the evolving scope of TCPA. And my bottom line in that was, how do we protect consumers? And I'll come back to that in a second. I don't know where Chairman Pai is going to go. He voted against these things, so the pendulum may shift. But I'll come back to that idea, as I say, in a second. And then the third thing that I think the commission is a really important role in, and that we tried to exercise, is in helping the industry help itself. As you know, we established the robocall task force, which did some significant work, but incomplete work. And it takes an agency like the FCC to pull all of that together, to pull all the industry players together to accomplish that. But but we need to be clear. I mean, the difficulty, one of the difficulties with robocalls is that the definition is so broad. It covers so many things. It goes from legitimate calls for legitimate purposes from legitimate businesses to scumbags. And of course, I want to hear from the bank. I want to hear from the hospital. I want to hear from the school. And the robocall technology makes sense for that. And phone and text can be a very legitimate and important way of communicating with consumers. The difficulty is there are rotten apples in every barrel, and those rotten apples screw up things for everybody. But worst of all, I can't think of another word or a better term than scumbags. These scumbags that rely on the unsuspecting and use IP technology to get around various blocking and enforcement techniques. And that was the real purpose behind the robocall task force. And I'll tell you a little story. Randall Stevenson, I called Randall Stevenson, the CEO of AT&T, and asked him to chair this task force because we needed to bring together everybody in the industry. And I called Randall and I said, Randall, I really need your leadership on this. He says, well, you're not the only guy calling me to talk about this. He says, my mother is too. and so he gets calls from his mother saying, excuse me, you're the CEO of AT&T. How come I keep getting these calls? And so there's real reason on all kinds of fronts to take important action on this. But only, the kind of work that you all are doing to provide identification is crucial. But also we have to have the ability to step up and shut off these IP-based fraudulent activities. And only a collective and continuing industry activity, only the kinds of things that you have done insofar as dips into HLRs collectively can, that kind of a collective approach is necessary if we're going to deal with the IP-based threats that are coming as well. Because, we hear a lot about the internet and fake news. Well, there's fake calls coming over the internet too, and we need to be able to nip them in the network. And so when the task force reported back to us in October, I told them, I said, we're not yet where we need you to be. It's great. You've made some progress. Everybody is getting organized. and I said we need to get back together in early 2017 to have a further report on what's happened. Commissioner Pai was the only commissioner who was not at that session of the robocall task force, and I don't know what Chairman Pai is going to do with that call back to report on fulfillment of next steps. But it's an important thing that I hope does get done. But the report that we did hear back from the task force, in one regard, well, by both major regards, was encouraging, but indicated there was more to do. I mean, the James Bond solutions, shaken and stir. I mean, I don't know who names these standards, but shaken and stir is terrific. The way they were accelerated by a couple of months in terms of the standard process, but now. The SIP Forum and ADAS and 3GPP and everybody else has to put these things to work, because if these aren't in the network, then nothing happens. And so it's important that there be a reporting back in saying, okay, here's what has happened with that. The other part that is challenging, as you know, is detection, assessment, and traceback, which is expensive and difficult, and yet is a network responsibility. We can't keep playing whack-a-mole, and we have to have those kind of tools in place. And I guess when you boil everything down, and I'll shut up here and be happy to respond to anything you want to talk about, guys, but I guess when you boil it all down, the scumbags have a great economic incentive and technological capability to work around whatever network protections are put in place. And so we need a collective activity of all the players in the ecosystem working together to be equally as aggressive in staying in front of these bad guys. The carriers must have the incentive to stop them. And frankly, I was trying to use the carrot and the stick to provide that incentive, because thus far, with the exception of some of the things that you guys have been doing, there's been a market failure to provide the incentives necessary to take these kinds of steps. Hopefully the industry is going to step up. As I said, I was encouraged. Believe me, I wish I was still there to be doing follow through. But I think that the kind of thing that you all are doing today, bringing everybody together to discuss this, is of crucial importance.
We appreciate that. No, thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. I think so much of what we've thought about, Ritesh, and here with all the people in the room today, is really just trying to get a summit meeting together to get all the people in the ecosystem to start talking to one another about what roles we play and what types of responsibility we have and what contributions we can make towards solving a lot of these issues. I think this is a great place to start. So I think getting people together, again, we're not talking about products and services here today so much as we're talking about what do we each have to do to make this problem better.
Right, and you very well said that, there are calls which are legitimate. Consumers want to receive a call from their bank if there's a fraud alert. They want to receive a call from their hospital for a reminder for an appointment. And we have in the audience here, we have banks, we have insurance companies, we have retailers, bureaus, and they're all want to comply with TCPA, but they're still running into challenges. And what do you think? Why do you think they're running into these challenges? Why are there still fines being levied when they want to comply? They're taking measures to comply.
Well, Ritesh, the taking measures is important and crucial, but it's not an affirmative defense. And as I said, this is a technology and a technique that is constantly evolving, where the economic incentive on the part of the bad guys keeps them evolving. The best compliance tool. You want the 100% absolute drop dead, there will be no enforcement. Don't call anybody without permission. But I know that that's challenging. People change phone numbers. There's all kinds of things in there. And I also know that the private right of action, which is contained in the legislation, is a serious concern for the good guys. And that's a congressional decision, as you know. I've believe me, I've heard the stories of liabilities that have been chalked up to a legitimate enterprise because of a third party that they hired or something else. But the issue there is that's what the statute says. I keep saying we'll come back to this in a minute, but I think that one of the important things that the industry can do is perhaps engage more with Congress. But there is a reason why, some of our biggest enforcement actions were in the robocall area, a couple of $3 million actions. I mean, you can't have 185 calls to folks who are on the do not call list and cell phones and expect to get away with it. It's that simple. But what's frustrating, I think, here is that the good guys are getting blackened by the bad guys. And on one hand, you can't go after the IP using scumbags because you can't find them. Okay, that's the problem. And on the other hand, the industry, the regulators, consumers are burdened by a 25-year-old law. I mean, the definition of auto dialer in the statute is ridiculous. Because in 1991, when the statute was written, it was a specific box. It was a specific piece of equipment. And it said anything that stores or produces numbers, uses random number generator, and can make a call. I think those are the three tests. Well, way back then, that was a special box. Today, it's anything. It's your smartphone. And that doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. And when guys like us go to enforce the law, that's what the law says. And you haven't got a whole heck of a lot of flexibility. So why are we seeing increased violations despite efforts to comply? Let me get back to your question. I'm sorry. Why are we seeing increased violations despite the effort to comply? Well, as I said, trying has never been an affirmative defense. The bad business practices of many tarnish all. And the scumbags are beating the networks in technology. And we got to go and attack all of those problems simultaneously.
Yeah, I think that's great. And here's insightful. I think a lot of people ask that question. It seems like there's so many solutions in the marketplace, and yet violations seem to be on the increase, and that's costing people money. I think folks are just trying to figure out how they can do the right thing here. And I think based on that, you mentioned an interesting point, right? We sometimes say in the fraud business, the best way to eliminate fraudsters from buying any or sort of stealing things from your website is to simply turn the website off. So you're thereby eliminating the fraudulent activity. But certainly a balance between good business and managing.
It has economic impacts, though.
Yeah, it doesn't really solve it. I think there probably is a balance somewhere between effective good business, making phone calls responsibly and in a way that is relevant to the consumers that are receiving them, but also trying to maintain, right, that there are these regulations that people need to comply with. And I think one thing that would be interesting, and maybe you have some forward-thinking thoughts around this, is where the industry might go. I mean, as technology continues to evolve, I think things will change on the technical front, but reaching out to customers probably won't. And the way that we do that, maybe that's Snapchat or Facebook or something down the road through social media. Do you have any sort of forward-thinking thoughts as we kind of look into this, how this might all?
And they're not technical forward-thinking thoughts. They're more statutory. I mean, let me go back to this. I mean, look. I mean, CTIA is in the room. This is something I would hope. I have a little familiarity with CTIA, and I know that they can step up and do important things. This is something that the industry collectively needs to be bringing to Congress. I mean, Congress sits up there in the hearings, and they bang away, bang away, bang away, with good reason, because there's a lot of pissed off consumers out there that are talking to them. But there needs to be an update in this act. There needs to be congressional guidance, for instance, on what constitutes a bad guy action. It's very general today. You throw it to the FCC and we've got to make decisions, but it's inside, again, a 25-year-old statute. I think the industry and consumers could come together to beat the bad guys, and that would be a good cause to undertake, and that and I bet the consumer groups would support this, because they don't like this kind of existing in limbo in a never land like we do statutorily now anyway. So I would urge that the kind of philosophy that brought you all together at this conference is also a philosophy that can bring the industry and all the players in the ecosystem together, not only to do what the task force is doing and solve the technical network problems, but also bring that same kind of energy to how do we update a quarter of a century old statute and use that to be able to target bad guys.
I think that's spot on, and I think that's some of the good work that's ahead of us. So, yeah. Tom, Chairman Wheeler, I think this has been fantastic. We found this really insightful. I think we'd love to stay in touch with you and all the folks in the room as well. I'm sure we'll have ongoing questions, and as this continues to develop, I think your thoughts and continued leadership in this space will continue to shape it for many years to come. And I think on that note, as we kind of wrap things up, I know we're heading out to DC not too far in the future, so maybe we'll have another taste test at Five Guys. I think that could be it.
So listen, here's my question. I leave tomorrow night for Europe. Do you think that you could FedEx a double and animal fries that would arrive here before I leave?
You'd be amazed at what we can do with technology. I think we can make that happen. Thank you.
Thanks,
so much,
guys. I really appreciate it, and congratulations for what you're doing, leadership you're showing, and the way you're bringing everybody together, because that's going to be the key.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate it. Okay. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks.